Welcome back. We have some alarming findings from a new survey that's out today suggesting that the belief in QAnon adjacent conspiracy theories in this country is much more widespread than feared, especially inside the Republican Party. The Public Religion Research Institute conducted a survey of thousands of Americans across all 50 states back in March, and they released their findings today. And here they are. First, 15% of all Americans say they agree with this statement, quote, "The government, media, and financial worlds in the United States are controlled by a group of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who run a global child sex trafficking operation." Again, that is more than 1 in every 8 Americans agree with that statement. And the number is notably higher among Republicans. It's 23%. Let me bring you to the next question. 20% of Americans say they agree with this statement. There is a storm coming soon that will sweep away the elites in power and restore the rightful leaders. That's right. 1 in 5 of all Americans believe that statement. Let that sink in a minute. Again, the number notably higher among Republicans. It's 28%, more than 1 in 4. And finally, here's the percentage of respondents who say they agree with this, that because things have gotten so far off track, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. 15% of all Americans agree with that. The number is nearly doubled among Republicans, 28%. Folks, based on these numbers, QAnon isn't just a conspiracy. It's a constituency. And it's largely concentrated inside the Republican Party. These aren't fringe groups anymore. They may feel like fringe ideas, but when a quarter or more of a political party agrees with conspiracies about Satan-worshipping pedophiles, storms that will restore the, quote, rightful leaders, and that violence might be necessary to save the country, we need to take notice. To be sure, all the normal caveats about polling methodologies apply here. But please, it's not hard to draw a bright line from the results in this poll to what we're seeing on Capitol Hill. Where as early as today, Senate Republicans appear to be poised to block a bipartisan agreement to form a commission to investigate the January 6th siege on Capitol Hill. I say appear because there is a quite the intense effort happening today by the mother of deceased Officer Brian Sicknick to try to convince Republicans not to do this. So joining me now on Capitol Hill, my NBC News colleague, Leanne Caldwell. I also have Jay Johnson and Brendan Buck with me. But I want to start with Leanne to get the latest on Capitol Hill and this vote. And I don't get too I know there's we may be here all night voting on a China bill, and maybe that pushes the January 6th vote till tomorrow or later. But I am curious, what are the chances this gets punted over the recess?
It's unclear, Chuck, and it's unclear because of this unrelated China bill that they're trying to figure out, a bipartisan bill that Republicans are reluctant to vote for at this point. We could focus on another segment on that alone. But as far as the January 6th commission is concerned, we don't know when this vote is going to take place. But as you mentioned, the mother of Brian Sicknick, who died the day after January 6th because of January 6th, is up here on Capitol Hill. She said that she could no longer sit on the sidelines as Republicans, one after the other, came out and said that they did not want to see a commission to investigate what happened. And the poll numbers that you just showed at the top of this segment is a good insight into why Republicans don't want to go down that route. There's a large section of the Republican Party who, doesn't even believe that January 6th is what January 6th is. And I want to highlight one conversation I had with Senator Ron Johnson earlier today. He is, of course, the senator who has said that January 6th was mostly peaceful. He also met with Gladys Sicknick earlier today. So I talked to him about that meeting. He said it was a good meeting. He met with her because he supports law enforcement. He said his previous comments did come up. He said they were misconstrued, that there were violent parts, but there was a lot of peaceful people that day, is how he explained it. He said the former president also came up. They agreed to disagree on what to do about it. He's not going to change his mind about the commission. But most notably, Chuck, still, 5 months after inauguration, after January 6th, I asked him if he thinks President Biden was legitimately elected on Election Day, and he says he is the legitimate president because he was inaugurated. But that is a much different question, Chuck, than believing the election results. And so you still have people within the Republican Party serving up here in Congress, not just in the House, but in the Senate, who still think that the president is not legitimately elected.
Right. No, Leanne, that's become the standard answer now. When a reporter asks the question, they say, well, he is legitimately president now. They want to avoid the actual specific there. Anyway, Leanne, I appreciate that update. All right, I want to chew over these results. I got Jeh Johnson, the former head of the Homeland Security, because this is clearly a security threat. We got Clint Watts, former FBI agent who focuses on this stuff, and Brendan Buck, a longtime Republican aide to Speakers Ryan and Boehner, among others. 1 in 5 Americans, Jeh Johnson, believe that a storm is coming. I can get in the Republican Party part in a minute. I want to do that with Brendan. But this, how much you look at this poll, and do you see a security risk for this country?
Yes, Chuck. I see a public health risk in this country because of the anti-vaccine sentiment that is expressed here. I see a homeland security, national security risk. Think about this. 1 in 6 Americans believe that the government is controlled by Satan-worshiping pedophiles. And I see a threat to our very democracy. If 1 in every 5 or 6 Americans believe these things, it makes it awful hard to try to reach compromise on the most basic of issues, like the one you were just talking about, the January 6th Commission. So in many ways, this is not surprising. I think we all knew that this kind of poll was coming, given the state of our politics, given the state of public sentiment right now. And it is very, very troubling. I hope all Americans take the time to understand this poll.
You know, Clint Watts and Control Room, if you can put up full screen number 7. And the pollsters noted that they separated out those that get their news primarily from broadcast, then they did Fox, and then they did farther right from Fox. They separated out Fox from the far right. And as you can see here, it really is these far right sources, 40% that get their news from very far right sources, OANN, Newsmax, and other social media sites. 40% believe in this Satan-worshipping pedophile business. It's 18% among Fox News viewers and 8% among those that get it from traditional broadcast networks. Clint, we've noted for a long time social media is sort of the accelerant here, but we are now seeing this impact.
That's right, Chuck. Without social media, there is no QAnon. It is a social media-powered phenomenon. And right along with that far-right sources, those far-right sources, the next question really was how much of it comes from television. And a large chunk of those don't even get their news from television. So this means it's the online space. They have to be getting it from social media. I think that's what we find is this sort of polarization, like Secretary Johnson was talking about. You know, if we can't identify what facts are, if we don't have common ground, there is no middle, there is no democracy. We have to be able to govern from facts and a reality, and QAnon is just not real. I think the other part that's deeply frightening about this survey and consistent with what we saw on January 6th, when we're talking about influence operations in social media, we want to see, okay, is it just noise or does it result in behavior change? We know it results in behavior change because we saw things like January 6th. We saw election interference. We're seeing people not show up to get their vaccines or resisting vaccines. That is a behavior change that comes from things like QAnon, a belief system that's completely fictitious that was just made up by unknown people. Literally, we don't know who they are. And so if people are committed to that belief system, it really starts to break down the gears of democracy. It's very hard to move forward as a country, and it's really hard to govern.
Brendan Buck, you saw, I know you've seen this number, you've seen the poll, it's greater among Republicans. This feels like a bigger problem inside the Republican Party than the nation as a whole, but look, it impacts all of us. What do you do about this virus? This is a quarter of the party.
Yeah, it's really hard. And I think it flows out of, for many years, Republican orthodoxy was that the media is against them. And so a lot of people went out and sort of created their own media ecosystem. And, some of this, I think, is human nature, confirmation bias. You want to believe what you want to believe. But at some point, people stopped acting in good faith, and there became these outlets where anything goes. And so people are drawn to that. And it is completely corrupted our ability to govern. Let's look at the commission bill, for example, Leanne was talking about. There's a poll out this week that shows a clear majority of Republicans believe that that riot was led by left-wing activists trying to make Donald Trump look bad. They're not just making that up. That's a conversation that is taking place that none of us are seeing unless you are watching those far-right networks. And look, how do we get out of this? I don't know. I used to think that you needed something truly catastrophic to happen, and that would fix it. Well, that happened on January 6th, and things haven't gotten better. Perhaps politically, the best thing we can hope for is that people, perhaps like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who tend to subscribe to this stuff, lose their reelection because this becomes so toxic. But right now, there's no evidence that that's happening.
So, Jeh Johnson, if you were at DHS today, what would you be doing to deal with what is the way Clint described it? We have this social media influence operation that may be able to spark violence. What would you be doing right now at DHS?
My last year in office, 2016, we got funding from Congress for grants to local organizations that would address violent extremism. Back then, given the current threat environment, we were focused principally on foreign-inspired terrorist acts, but we also put money aside for domestic-based violent extremism. I would much more focus on that. There are groups in this country devoted to de-radicalization, domestic-based type, and I'd want to highlight those groups and fund their efforts. That would be priority number one, as well as ensuring that our law enforcement and our intelligence communities are focused on this threat stream, because it is a big one.
Clint Watts, I'm curious, QAnon has actually gone silent. Ever since the gentleman Ron Watkins, who was the 8chan moderator, was sort of fingered in that HBO documentary. He's clearly gone silent. Whether he is definitely QAnon or not, it certainly it doesn't look like it's more than a coincidence that he has stopped, or QAnon has stopped giving these clues or whatever you want to call them. But it hasn't stopped the movement, which is really scary.
The most understudied part is the demand for disinformation. It's what I've, my own personal process of this, many years now, going back to about 2014, watching Russian disinformation become overwhelmed by American disinformation and these conspiracy theories. What I realize is that people, because of social media, can manufacture, they can find, they can create and share, they can find their own belief system if they want to. And social media is the connective tissue that allows them to do that. So it's the other part of it is, why do people demand this? Why are they seeking this out? And the tendency is, if they believe one conspiracy, they will believe many. It's almost a play on the "where we go one, we go all" QAnon motto, which is, it is more about community. Right. It's about the demand for disinformation and the quest to create a reality that conforms to what they want. I think there's some deep psychological research we got to look at in terms of how that plays out with confirmation bias and implicit bias on social media.
Well, let me put up full screen number 8 here. This is among QAnon believers. Among these folks, nearly 40% believe the COVID vaccine contains a surveillance microchip. 3/4 of these folks believe the election was stolen from Trump, and 85% believe COVID was manufactured in a lab. Brendan Buck, there's always a debate about whether Donald Trump is the cause or he's just the inevitable result of what was festering for years. Where do you come down on that?
A bit of both, but I definitely think that he is a symptom of something bigger that was going on. But you still would expect that someone who was elected president of the United States would try to be part of the solution, and he clearly wasn't. He certainly fed into these crazy notions. Look, I will not suggest that QAnon is any part of Republican orthodoxy or leaders believe it or anything like that. But the challenge that Republicans have is that there's no real incentive to try to purge it out, to try to fight it. And one of those things, I think, stems from the political calculation that Donald Trump made, which is to bank everything on a demographic that is shrinking. and we call it white working class voters. When you are building everything around white working class voters, you don't have a lot of margin to throw people overboard. And so there's not a lot of incentive. There's not a lot of room for error for Republican leaders to try to purge people out. And that, I think, one of the ways you would fight this is to see leaders pushing them out, but they just don't have the incentive to do that.
Clint, who would be effective here? I mean, look, Brendan Buck's former, I'll joke, once and future and former boss, Paul Ryan, he's at the Reagan Library. He's certainly denouncing this form, wants the Republican Party to move in another direction. But at the end of the day, no matter what, McConnell or Ryan, I mean, if Donald Trump is the one sort of saying, well, I know the QAnon people don't like pedophiles, I don't like pedophiles either. I mean, until he denounces it, does this not go away?
There's two ways to look at it, Chuck. I think the easiest way and the most significant way is to have Donald Trump really either come out and say, hey, this is nonsense and I don't believe in it, or the other way is to really try and take truth on offense. We still are in a very traditional way of putting out official messages and official statements from the government. But the whole impetus around this crowdsourced crazy of QAnon is that it is socially constructed to repel elites, to repel the establishment, which means you really have to think about unwinding social media, which means you need to get there quickly, and you need to get there in their local communities from people that look like them and talk like them in their audience space. I think that's critical, particularly in the right now, where you're seeing success is from doctors locally going out and doing the messaging, or election officials like in Georgia going out and doing that fight and resisting.
Right. Well, look, we rarely spend 20 minutes on a single topic like this, but Clint Watts, Jeh Johnson, Brendan Buck, I think we could have gone another 10 at least. Thanks for your time with this.